Welcome back, Night Wanderer. You're safe here now. The world outside is fading, the glow of day dimming into a hush, the quiet hum of darkness softening your breath, your heartbeat, your thoughts. Let the shadows settle gently around you, like velvet drawn across the world. Tonight, we journey into history, but not the kind etched proudly in marble, or recited at coronations. No. Tonight's tale winds through corridors the sunlight never touched, behind tapestries, through forgotten stairwells, beneath crowns. This is where the real power lived, in whispers, in veiled glances, in the flicker of a candle where no one was supposed to see. These are the secrets, the quiet, scandalous truths that royalty buried in silence. You've likely heard the polished versions: grand queens, noble kings, divine right, glorious dynasties. But history isn't clean, and crowns aren't light. Tonight you'll hear what the bards dared not sing, of queens accused of sorcery, of royal heirs who vanished without a trace, of hidden pregnancies, forbidden love, poisonings and betrayals that stained tapestries red. No need to stay alert. In fact, I hope you don't. Let this journey lull you. Let each scandal unfold like a warm fog wrapping around your senses. Let your breath slow as history begins to whisper. Take one more deep breath. And now, drift. She came across the sea, regal and radiant. Isabella of France, daughter of Philip IV, Queen of England. They called her beautiful, wise, pious, and later a she-wolf. She married Edward II of England, but the fairy tale ended before it began. Edward was infatuated with someone else, not his wife, but his court favorite, Piers Gaveston. Gaveston, flamboyant and arrogant, mocked the Queen and flaunted his influence. Isabella's humiliation was public, brutal, and unending. When Gaveston was executed by nobles, Edward clung to another favorite, Hugh Despencer. He was worse. He confiscated Isabella's lands, imprisoned her allies, and isolated her from court. And so Isabella waited. She gathered allies, including Roger Mortimer, a powerful noble, and soon her lover. Together, they did the unthinkable, launched an invasion. They swept into England in 1326, seizing control. Edward fled, captured, he was imprisoned. What followed was silence. A death unconfirmed, but rumored to be horrific. A red-hot poker inserted rectally, leaving no mark. A punishment designed to humiliate, to erase, to silence. Was it true? Perhaps. Or perhaps it was a story invented to stain him in memory. Isabella ruled England through her son Edward III, for several years before being overthrown by him. Her final years were quiet. But her name, forever whispered in corridors of power. They were young, too young to be dangerous. And yet, Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury vanished from the Tower of London, and history itself. Their uncle, Richard of Gloucester, was named Lord Protector. But within weeks he declared them illegitimate, and crowned himself King Richard III. The boys were never seen again. Rumours swirled, smothered in their sleep, starved, poisoned, drowned. Centuries later, bones were found beneath a staircase, small, human, believed to be theirs, but no proof. Some claimed one of the boys escaped, returning as a pretender named Perkin Warbeck. He claimed to be Richard, the younger brother. He gained allies, sparked uprisings. But he was captured and executed. Was he an imposter? Or the real prince, silenced again? The truth remains in the shadows. The tower stands, silent, watching, remembering. Joan of Navarre once sat beside a king. Henry IV of England. A queen by marriage, a widow by fate. She lived peacefully, until her stepson Henry V accused her of trying to kill him, with sorcery. Why? No real evidence was offered. Only whispers. A court astrologer. Accusations of spells. Potions. Demonic contracts. Her properties were seized, her dignity stripped. For 4 years Joan languished in confinement. No trial, no justice, just silence. And then, suddenly released. No apology, no explanation. Was it political maneuvering? Superstition? Fear? In the end, Joan's name faded from history books. But in those hidden archives, in the margins, her story lingers, like a phantom sigh on ancient parchment. Mary of Windsor was no ordinary nun. She came from noble blood. She took her vows in a priory known for housing the daughters of knights and barons. And then, she became pregnant. The child's father was never named. But whispers echoed. A Plantagenet prince, a known visitor, charming, reckless. The church was swift. Mary was sent away. The baby disappeared. Some said the child was smuggled to France. Others claimed he lived out his life as a monk, unaware of his royal blood. But one diary, a personal account hidden in a Flemish convent, suggests the child bore a birthmark matching that of a known royal, proof, or legend. Either way, the scandal was buried, and the child forgotten. Almost. Paris. 1314. A tower. The Tour de Nesle, a place of seclusion and scandal. 3 royal daughters-in-law were accused of adultery. The accusation came from Isabella of France, the same she-wolf who had once lived among them. Guards testified. Knights were tortured. Confessions spilled. 2 knights were executed, flayed, castrated, displayed. The women? Imprisoned, shamed, their children disinherited. Only one was spared death. Jeanne, whose husband, future King Philip V, forgave her, but France's image shattered. The Capuchin line began to crumble, and the tower, haunted now, they say, by the echoes of betrayal. She was barely 14 when she married Peter of Castile. He abandoned her after 3 days, returned to his mistress, and left Blanche imprisoned in remote castles, cut off from court, family, and the world. She wrote letters, pleaded, cried. Then, silence. Years passed. Her death was announced. No cause listed. Poison, said some, starvation, others, a quiet erasure. But her memory stirred poets, who wrote of a ghost bride wandering palace halls, clutching a faded veil, whispering for justice. Perkin Warbeck appeared in 1490, claiming to be Richard, Duke of York, the younger prince believed to have died in the Tower. He spoke fluent English, knew courtly manners, even bore a resemblance. Supporters rallied. Margaret of Burgundy, sister of the vanished princes, called him nephew. But Henry VII saw a threat. Warbeck was captured, forced to confess, then hanged. Yet doubts remain. Was he a pretender? Or the last echo of a stolen crown? In the shadowed halls of 14th-century Castile, King Alfonso XI defied convention and morality by elevating his mistress, Leonor de Guzman, to the highest influence. She was not queen, yet she held more sway than any crowned woman in Spain. She bore the king 10 children, appeared at court, controlled appointments, advised on diplomacy. They called her cunning, beautiful, dangerous. Some whispered that she used sorcery, that her power came not only from seduction, but spells, that she bathed in herbs under moonlight, that she burned beeswax dolls to curse rivals, that she spoke to the dead. After Alfonso's death, the Queen Maria of Portugal struck. She imprisoned Leonor in the fortress of Talavera. No trial, no formal charges. And then the order came. Leonor was strangled in her cell. But her death birthed a legacy. Her sons, embittered, rose against the crown. Her lineage would lead to kings. Her name, once stained, now etched in blood and rebellion. A sorceress, they said. Perhaps. Or perhaps just a woman too powerful for her time. She was born to rule. The only surviving legitimate child of King Henry I of England. Her name was Matilda, Empress Matilda. And yet, when her father died, the crown passed, not to her, but to her cousin Stephen. Why? She was a woman. And that, in medieval Europe, was scandal enough. Matilda refused to yield. She waged war. A civil conflict that historians now call the Anarchy. She led armies, was crowned queen, and uncrowned the same night. Fled battles in disguise, crossed frozen rivers in the dark. Chroniclers painted her as proud, arrogant, masculine, dangerous. But her son became King Henry II. Matilda never sat fully on the throne. But every English monarch since carries her blood. The scandal wasn't her rebellion. It was that she believed herself equal to a king, and almost proved it. John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, was a pillar of Plantagenet power. Married 3 times. Father to kings. But it was his 3rd marriage that stirred centuries of controversy. His mistress, Catherine Swynford, bore him children, illegitimate, bastards by law. And then, after decades, he married her, their children were legitimized. The Beaufort line, they were called, noble, but forbidden from claiming the crown. That clause would be forgotten until the Wars of the Roses. For from the Beaufort line came Henry Tudor, who became Henry VII. He won the throne through battle, but through blood. His claim was murky. Royal bastards, crowned. History's neat lines smudged by love and war. Margaret of Anjou, queen to Henry VI, was fierce, loyal, merciless. But behind her iron gaze, some say, was a secret. The court whispered of a knight, Edmund Beaufort, with whom she shared more than politics. Her son, Edward of Westminster, was wild, unstable, violent, nothing like Henry. And he resembled Edmund. Was Edward the king's son, or the knight's? No one dared ask, but it stained the boy's legitimacy. He died at Tewkesbury. His claim extinguished. But the whisper remains, passed like a ghost through centuries. Richard III. Villain or victim? His reign short, his reputation long debated. But his bloodline? Even more complicated. Some scholars believe Richard's claim to the throne was tenuous, rooted in questions of legitimacy. His own parents, cousins to the crown, may have married in secrecy. Even more scandalous, Richard may have fathered illegitimate children of his own. One, known only as Catherine, appears briefly in court records before disappearing. Another, John of Gloucester, was executed quietly by the Tudors. Was Richard trying to build a hidden dynasty, or erase threats to his fragile rule? No answers. Only shadows. James III of Scotland was odd. He preferred the company of artists and astrologers to his own nobles. Slept in monastic cells, refused to fight, refused to hunt. His queen, Margaret of Denmark, bore him sons, but lived apart from him for years. Rumors swirled that James had taken religious vows in secret, that he spoke to spirits, that he refused intimacy, that his children may not be his. His nobles rebelled. Margaret died. James was killed at the Battle of Sorcheburn. But was he truly a king? Or a monk in a crown? Catherine de' Medici ruled France not through power, but poison. So said her enemies. She was blamed for everything: assassinations, civil war, even black magic. Her court was filled with astrologers. Her apartments filled with secret passageways. She wore mourning black every day after her husband's death. Most damning was the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, where thousands of Protestants were slaughtered. Catherine, some say, ordered it herself, but historians disagree. Was she ruthless? Or trapped? A woman in a world of men. Surviving through illusion and terror. A spider queen, they called her. Yet in truth, she may have only been weaving a web to keep France from tearing apart. Charles II of England came after the fall of the Puritan regime. He brought back laughter, theatre, extravagance, and lovers. Many. He fathered at least 14 illegitimate children. One with a duchess, another with an actress, a few with chambermaids. His queen, Catherine of Braganza, bore none. But Charles never named a successor among his bastards. Instead, his brother James, deeply unpopular and Catholic, inherited the crown. And thus, the Glorious Revolution followed. Had Charles named one of his many sons, history might have changed. A king of pleasure, a kingdom of chaos, a scandal of mischances. In the glittering court of 15th century Castile, Queen Juana of Portugal vanished. Officially she had retired to a convent, but the story was complicated. Juana was married to King Henry IV of Castile, a monarch known for his political indecisiveness and personal eccentricities. Their marriage was unconsummated for years. Court rumors called him impotent, others called him celibate. Some whispered he preferred male company. But then Juana bore a daughter, Joanna la Beltraneja, and everything unraveled. Accusations arose that Joanna was not the king's child, but that of one of Juana's supposed lovers, Beltran de la Cueva. The nickname, La Beltraneja, stuck like a bruise. Juana was quietly exiled to a convent, and then, she died. Or so the record claimed. Years later, a noble in Portugal documented a visit with a veiled woman of grace and sorrow, living in obscurity under the protection of the church. Was it Juana? Had she faked her death to escape scandal? Or was she quietly murdered? Her daughter's claim to the throne was later contested, sparking a succession war. But Juana's silence and possible escape remains one of Castile's quietest disappearances. In the courts of Renaissance Milan, where stars were read like scripture, Prince Giovanni Visconti met an untimely end. He was young, brilliant, curious, and obsessed with astrology. His teacher, a famed astrologer named Zacuto, was said to have predicted the date of Giovanni's death, claiming that Mars and Saturn would align over his natal chart in a way that spelled ruin. On that very night the prince fell from a parapet. Some said it was suicide, others said murder. But a third theory emerged, that Zacuto himself had arranged the death to preserve his prediction. A self-fulfilling prophecy, drenched in scandal. The court disbanded its astrology program. Zacuto fled. The stars remained silent. But in the margins of old manuscripts, faded notes in Latin remain. Calculations, birth charts, and a phrase scrawled like a curse: sic transit regia fortuna. So passes royal fortune. Louis IX of France was canonized a saint, but his court held one of the strangest relic scandals in Christendom. He purchased what was claimed to be the crown of thorns, the actual crown worn by Christ during the crucifixion, for an astronomical sum. It was paraded through the streets, placed in the Sainte-Chapelle, built just for it. But behind the scenes, rival factions whispered that it was fake. Merchants from Venice and Constantinople claimed multiple thorns had been sold to kings, nobles, and even popes. Had Louis been deceived? Or had he knowingly embraced a lie to wield power through piety? A courtier's letter surfaced decades later detailing a bribe paid to a Byzantine intermediary, suggesting the relic may have been crafted. A scandal of belief, wrapped in gold leaf and faith. Mary, Queen of Scots, lived a life so dramatic it often reads like fiction. But one of her boldest acts happened quietly, in a small room, with few witnesses. After the death of her husband, Francis II of France, Mary returned to Scotland. She was young, Catholic, and politically volatile, but in private, she ordered a second coronation. Not by clergy, but by her own hand. A court scribe recorded it, Mary placing a crown on her head before a mirror, whispering Latin phrases not found in any liturgy. Was it symbolic? A rejection of church authority? A secret pact with her unborn heir? Shortly after, she married Lord Darnley, whose murder would later destroy her. But that secret self-coronation remains a mystery, a moment where a queen defied the world and crowned her own soul. In 14th-century Burgundy, a noble child named Jeanne was raised as a boy for nearly a decade. She wore trousers, trained with swords, was called Jeanne. Only on the eve of an arranged marriage did her parents reveal the truth. She was biologically female. The ruse had been to avoid an inheritance dispute where daughters had no claim. The court erupted. The fiancé refused the match. A dowry was offered. Jeanne was quietly married off to a minor nobleman and erased from primary records, but her name reappears in peasant poetry, the princess knight who once ruled the stables. A royal scandal born from desperation and defiance. Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, was regal, stoic, and feared. But one night each year he hosted a secret masquerade known only to his inner circle. Court records list the occasion vaguely as Nox Rosé, Knight of the Rose. Letters between his valet and a bishop describe masked figures, blindfolded dancers, and private rooms arranged for, quote, confessions of flesh. It's unclear if Philip participated or merely watched. But one year, a foreign envoy was found dead the next morning, his mask still on. No charges were filed, no autopsy performed, and Nox Rosé was never held again. But its legend lingers, a night when power wore perfume and secrets wore silk. Queen Hedwig of Silesia was beloved, pious, and serene. But in 1247, a woman appeared claiming to be Hedwig, dressed identically, bearing her ring, and fluent in court dialects. She claimed she had been replaced by an impostor during a pilgrimage. The court was divided. Some nobles believed her. Others swore allegiance to the woman already on the throne. Both women stood in the cathedral. Identical. Silent. The king chose the woman he had married. The claimant was imprisoned. She died nameless. But in later paintings, Hedwig is always painted twice. Once in gold, once in grey. Isabella of Aragon was promised to a French prince. Her dowry, a stretch of borderland, rich in vineyards. But when the prince died suddenly, France demanded the land anyway. Castile refused. Letters were exchanged. Soldiers marched. Within months 2 kingdoms were at war, over a promise tied to a girl who never made it to the altar. Some said Isabella cursed the match, that she predicted the prince's death. Others claimed he never died. only fled with a lover and changed his name. The war ended in ruins. The dowry eventually was burned. Before Elizabeth Bathory's notorious bloodbaths, her cousin, Countess Ilona Nadasdy, was accused of a quieter horror. She served Queen Maria of Hungary and was said to collect blood from virgins for medicinal anointing. A maid was found with deep cuts. Another died from blood loss. Ilona was never charged, but was quietly removed from court. Her chambers sealed. Maria never spoke of her again. But some speculate this scandal inspired the later terrors of Elizabeth Bathory, whose name would become legend. In 15th-century Bavaria, Duchess Kunigunde bore twins, one resembling her husband, the Duke, and one, a knight of the court. Rather than silence the scandal, the Duke embraced both. He claimed divine intervention, that God had split his seed and, quote, shared it with the worthy. The Church denounced him. The Pope threatened excommunication. The Duke stood firm. The twins were raised equally. One became a priest, the other, a general. But their bloodlines diverged. Two dynasties from one womb, fathered by two men. A scandal of flesh, and a miracle of medieval myth. Queen Isabella of Castile, mother of Catherine of Aragon, is remembered as a pious reformer, a fierce ruler, and co-architect of the Spanish Inquisition. But behind her alabaster legacy lies a tale the chronicles tried to forget. In 1475, months before giving birth to her son, Isabella reportedly delivered a second infant. A girl, still breathing yet hidden. A twin. The girl was spirited away by midwives under royal order. The reason? Superstition. In 15th-century Spain, twins were often seen as omens. The second child, born minutes after the heir, was considered a threat. A dark mirror. A record, buried in a monastery, lists a daughter of the Queen, raised in secret by the Sisters of Our Lady of Silence. She never took vows, never left the convent, and in her final days, she carved the name Isabelita into her chamber door, the name of a daughter erased before she was ever held. Queen Margaret of Denmark, wife of Scotland's James III, led a quiet, dutiful life. She bore heirs, supported charities, attended Mass daily, but her letters, discovered centuries later, stashed in a bishop's vault, reveal something more. A correspondence with her personal confessor, Brother Ailby, a humble Irish monk assigned to her spiritual care. The letters are tender, poetic, devotional. Some believe it was innocent, but others argue the language is unmistakable, veiled with scripture, but laced with longing. Margaret died young. Some blamed illness. Others claimed poison. But the final letter from Ailby reads, "Though I held your soul before God, it was your breath I prayed to feel." He vanished the same week she died. In Strasbourg 1518, dozens of people began dancing uncontrollably, some for hours, others for days. A frenzy historians still can't explain. But buried in diplomatic correspondence is a connection few discuss. King Louis XII's mistress, Amélie de Sade, had recently been exiled from court for, quote, conduct unbefitting the Virgin's Eve. She fled to Strasbourg, where she practiced folk healing and taught ecstatic movement rituals. When the plague struck, townsfolk claimed it began near her cottage. Was it illness, hysteria, or a ritual gone too far? A surviving courtier's letter reads, "She danced with fire in her eyes, and the devil watched from the crowd." Amélie disappeared that autumn. In 12th century Austria, Leopold V was said to have had a son, twice. The first, born to his wife Agnes, was announced with celebration. But the child died days later. Then, a year later, another son, born in secrecy to a courtesan, identical in name, appearance, even birthmark. Agnes adopted him publicly, calling it a miracle. The court was forbidden from asking questions. But whispers persisted, that the second boy was the same as the first, revived by alchemy, or swapped, or hidden, and the original never died at all. The child became Duke Frederick I, known for erratic moods and strange visions. In his personal journal, one entry repeats, "I am he who came twice, and still not once." In the Kingdom of Navarre, King Charles IV died with no male heirs, officially. But an apothecary's logbook from 1378 tells of deliveries made to a locked cellar beneath the royal chapel, for the boy with the pale eyes. No records mention such a boy. Years later, when the palace was sacked, soldiers found a small bed, toys and journals written in a child's hand, signed, Carlos Rex Secundus, a hidden son, an illegitimate heir, a prisoner prince. We may never know, The cellar was sealed. But the ghost stories continue. After the death of King Henry III of England, Queen Eleanor of Provence retired to Amesbury Priory. Publicly, she took a quiet life of prayer, but a diary from a lady-in-waiting tells a different tale. At night, the priory came alive. Candles, music, masks. Eleanor held private gatherings with exiled nobles, foreign emissaries, and former lovers. Her rooms were adorned with velvet, not sackcloth. One entry details a game played behind locked doors, where attendees swapped identities for an evening. Roles reversed, confessions made, rivalries forgiven or inflamed. Some said she ruled more freely in widowhood than she ever had in life. They called her the Masquerade Widow. And when she finally passed, her burial robe was made of crimson silk, not monastic grey. Anne of Brittany was twice Queen of France, known for her elegance, her patronage of the arts, and her collection of illuminated prayer books. But scholars studying her personal psalter noticed something strange. Margins filled with herbal recipes, each marked with a tiny snake icon. These were not beauty tips. They were poison instructions. Nightshade in wine, henbane in ink, toadflax under the tongue. Why would a queen need such knowledge? One theory: her children died young. One by one. Some suspected poisoning. Anne, they say, sought revenge, or prevention. Others argue she prepared in case she had to kill, or be killed. The book now rests in the Royal Library in Paris. But those pages are locked, viewed only with special permission. Constance of Aragon was said to be mad, wild-eyed, disobedient. At 16 she defied her arranged marriage, publicly declaring love for a poet, a man of no title. She was confined to a tower for a month. Then, she disappeared. For decades, her name was unspoken, erased from court records. But in 1911, during renovations of a Catalonian monastery, masons uncovered a hollow wall. Inside, a skeleton, adorned in jeweled silk, a hair comb, and a poem, etched into the plaster ending with, "I love, I lived, I died, where no voice could reach me." It bore her sigil. During the Black Death, a noblewoman fleeing Florence took refuge in a rural cloister. She gave birth during the outbreak, alone, attended only by nuns. The child, a girl, was named Rosalia. Records list her as of unknown father. But 15 years later she was summoned to court by order of the Duke of Tuscany. No reason was given. She was tutored, dressed in finery, hidden again. Rumors said the Duke had fathered her. Others whispered she was heir to a holy relic. Born on the night the plague claimed 10,000 souls. She died young, but her tombstone reads, "The rose without roots." Prince Ladislaus of Hungary was born lame, his left foot turned inward. His father ignored him. His tutors mocked him. But Ladislaus had a gift. His voice. A pure tenor, so sweet it was said to calm storms. He fell in love with a bard, a young man named Eric. They performed in secret, composing lullabies and ballads. But when their relationship was discovered, Eric was hanged. Ladislaus never spoke again. He ruled briefly, signing decrees in silence. His court was filled with birds. When he died, they found his final song, inscribed in gold leaf, folded under his pillow. It ended with, "Let me live only in music, if I may not live in love." Ariane of Sicily was 17, when she boarded a royal galley bound for her betrothed in Aragon. She never arrived. The ship was found days later, floating near Corsica, sails torn, crew dead, no trace of Ariane. Rumors churned like waves, pirates, assassins, storms. But one whispered theory remained, that she jumped, willingly, to escape her fate. A letter later surfaced in Marseille, unsigned, but bearing her private seal. "Better the arms of the sea than the bed of a man I did not choose." Her body was never found. But every spring fishermen claimed to see a pale figure on the cliffs, hair trailing like seaweed, crown made of coral. Cecily of York, sister to the ill-fated princes in the Tower, lived under constant suspicion. But it was her first daughter, born in secret, that history tried to forget. Cecily had been promised to the Scottish throne, but before the journey north, she fell ill and retreated to a convent, where she gave birth. The father's name was never recorded. The child was left behind, raised by the sisters, known only as Sister Seraphina, but court scribes later noted a nun in Yorkshire who bore a striking resemblance to Elizabeth of York. She died young, but was buried in a satin shroud, not common linen. And on her grave, the inscription, "The blood of roses, never crowned." In 1375, the Royal Library of Lowen was consumed by fire. Officials blamed lightning, but some believed otherwise. Among the ashes were works thought lost forever, banned books, censored treatises, and a scroll titled Testamentum Regium, detailing the illegitimate children of half a dozen European monarchs. One witness described men entering the library before dawn and fleeing hours before the blaze. The official logs for that week? Missing. The surviving librarian, Brother Aurelius, wrote only this in his final journal: "We burned truth to preserve peace, but smoke remembers." During the Avignon papacy, where popes ruled from France, one cardinal rose swiftly: Lucien d'Orléans. Elegant, charismatic, and dangerously close to the young Crown Prince of Naples. Their correspondence, later uncovered in Vatican archives, reads like love poetry cloaked in scripture. The prince's tutors grew suspicious. When Lucien was accused of heresy, the prince pleaded publicly for his innocence. Lucien was defrocked, banished. The prince never married. Years later, in a letter addressed to the shepherd of my soul, the prince writes, "If loving you was sin, then I was born in damnation, and shall die rejoicing in it." When Queen Adelaide of Thuringia died in 1312, her body was prepared for burial by royal surgeons. To their shock, they found two hearts in her chest. One human, the other wax, anatomically impossible. Spiritually, unexplainable. Some said it was a magical protection charm, placed there by court alchemists after a failed poisoning. Others claimed it symbolized her double life, one for her husband, one for her secret lover. The wax heart now rests in the treasury of Würzburg Cathedral. Its inscription reads, "One heart beats. One keeps the secret." Helena of Ghent was never meant to be queen. She was a seamstress. Clever, sharp-eyed, discreet. She caught the attention of Duke William of Brabant. When his wife died mysteriously, Helena was elevated, first to mistress, then to duchess, then, shockingly, to queen. But scandal clung to her hemline. Noble women refused her court. Priests whispered. She ruled in silence, with quill and thread. When she died, a dress was found hidden in her wardrobe, embroidered not with flowers, but with tiny Latin phrases. A confession, sewn stitch by stitch, admitting to the death of the former duchess. The thread was red. In Prague, under the reign of Rudolf II, the court was obsessed with the occult, astrology, necromancy, and alchemy. One alchemist, Cornelius of Silesia, claimed he could create a child without sin, conceived not through flesh, but spirit and element. Months later, a baby was brought to court, pale, quiet, with golden eyes. Cornelius claimed he'd created her from royal blood, herbs, and divine fire, using a lock of hair from the emperor's late sister. The child grew and vanished. Years later, a nun appeared in Krakow, blind but claiming to see the shape of souls. She was said to whisper truths no one had spoken aloud. Some called her a miracle, others, a mistake. When Archduchess Sophia of Austria lost her husband to fever, she retreated into mourning. Black veils, silent meals, locked doors. But months later, servants claimed they heard two voices from her chamber, hers and his. She wrote daily letters to him. They were returned unopened. Then came the dolls, crafted to resemble him. One seated beside her at every meal, another placed in her bed. The court physician declared her touched by grief, but one maid claimed she saw the Archduke breathing. Was it madness, magic, or refusal to let go? Sophia died clutching a doll's hand. Marie of Lorraine was known for her serenity, her grace, her long walks by the water. One morning her crown was found floating in Lac Léman, her slippers on the shore. No body. A note was pinned to her gown. "What cannot bend, breaks, but I was born to ripple." Some believe she drowned herself to escape an unwanted second marriage. Others whisper she swam away, into legend. Fishermen say that on windless nights, they hear a voice singing from the middle of the lake in flawless Latin. Esme was strange from the start. She spoke late, walked in circles, and collected seashells obsessively. Daughter to a Breton duke, she preferred the tide pools to the ballroom. At 15, she predicted the death of her uncle, to the hour. They called her touched, gifted, or cursed. But when her marriage was arranged to a Danish prince, she fled, leaving behind only a necklace made of shells. Years later, a fisherman found a letter sealed in coral. They crowned me in chains, but I will not rule where I cannot breathe. They say she still walks the coast at twilight, barefoot and humming. Elsbeth of Bohemia was crowned on the night of a lunar eclipse. The sky darkened, wolves howled, and a hush fell across Prague. The astrologers warned the king. It was a cursed sign. He ignored them. For years, Elsbeth remained dutiful, quiet, invisible. But one night, under another lunar eclipse, she disappeared. No doors broken, no signs of struggle. Her bed was untouched, her slippers still by the fire. One tower guard claimed to see a woman in white walking across the palace roof, lit by moonlight, and then gone. In her chamber, they found only a single line written in her prayer book: "When the moon returns to shadow, so shall I." She never returned. Prince Anselm of Savoy was 16 when he fell in love with a nobleman's daughter. Their union was forbidden, unequal in rank, improper in appearance, utterly scandalous, but Anselm swore a sacred oath that he would never wed another, and that his blood would bind them. They cut their palms, pressed them together, and recited wedding vows, not before priest or crown, but beside a ruined chapel under starlight. When the girl was later betrothed to another, she wept herself ill. Anselm never married, died in battle at 20. When his grave was opened for reinterment, a lock of her hair was found tied to the bones of his hand, sealed with dried blood. So now, dear listener, the candle has burned low. Its wax has softened. Its flame, once bold, now flickers like a sigh. You've wandered through royal halls and storm-lit battlefields, through whispered betrayals and forbidden desires, through chambers where power once dressed in perfume and silk, and where secrets passed more easily than prayers. You've heard the scandals they never wanted written. You've seen queens dethroned by rumor, kings undone by lust, children erased to preserve a crown, and lovers silenced by blades held just out of view. But as your eyes grow heavy, and your thoughts begin to drift like snow through quiet castles, let us ask, why do these scandals still whisper to us? Why do they echo through time, like wind through ruins? Because they remind us of something simple, something strangely comforting. That even those draped in velvet and diamonds were human, not gods, not myths, just people, aching, grasping, doubting, burning. Just people who sometimes loved the wrong person, or trusted the wrong friend, or lost everything to a single lie. Power did not make them immune. It only made their heartbreaks louder, their sins harder to bury. The truth is, behind every crown is a question. Behind every portrait, a shadow. Behind every royal name, a version of history we were never meant to hear. And yet, here you are, hearing it, letting it settle into your breath, your bones, letting it keep you company as the night deepens. So rest now. Let the secrets go quiet. Let the scandal turn to fog. Let history, for once, be gentle. The torches have burned low in the great hall. The gowns and swords are long returned to dust. But tonight, just tonight, they lived again for you. And now, they sleep. And so should you. Until next time. Good night.